I've seen a statistic that says that 40 to 60% of our global food production is lost due to pests and diseases. If you're keeping your containers healthy, your plants are more likely to resist pests and diseases. But if you get them, you need to be prepared. There are some things you can do to prevent pests, as well as some sustainable strategies you can use, which I'll go over. I'm Dr. Denise DeBusk, and this video will cover some common pests and diseases, as well as ways to manage them. When it comes to pest management, you should be taking an integrated approach. Integrated pest management, or IPM, is an effective and environmentally sensitive approach to pest management that relies on a combination of common sense practices. The management strategies include cultural control, biological control, mechanical or physical control, and chemical control. Cultural controls are practices that reduce the pest establishment, reproduction, dispersal, and survival of the pest. These can include changes to irrigation practices, removing diseased plant material through sanitation, or companion planting. This also includes genetic control through planting seeds that have resistance to diseases or insects. Physical or mechanical control includes spraying plants with water, using barriers or traps, or soil solarization. Biological control is the use of predators or parasites to manage pests, such as releasing ladybugs to control aphids. Lastly, chemical control uses pesticides such as insecticides and fungicides to manage pests. Some pesticides are more toxic to people and the environment, while others have low toxicity and are more environmentally safe. I'll cover some of those in this presentation. When it comes to IPM, you should scout early and often. Check the undersides of leaves for pests and focus on looking at the whole plant for symptoms. Pests can be generally classified by how they eat. First, we have pests that chew the leaves. You will commonly find holes in leaves or plant parts missing. Flea beetles are small, dark, shiny beetles that can hop when disturbed. Larvae will feed on the roots of seedlings while adults feed on the leaves and stems. Slugs and snails are soft-bodied with or without a shell with prominent antennae. They prefer moist areas and feed on the leaves and fruit. Hornworms are green caterpillars with white bands and red horns that can get over 2 inches long. They can chew down a tomato within a few days. Cutworms are ugly gray-brown caterpillars that have a greasy appearance. They come out at night and can cut the stems of seedlings. Cabbage worms are fuzzy, green, and slow-moving that can decimate the foliage of cruciferous vegetables. You can find recommended treatments of these pests in your reference guide to companion plants and natural pest management. The second type are piercing sucking insects that uses a stylet mouthpart to inject its leaves or fruit and suck the contents out. These pests can often transmit viruses in their saliva. Aphids are tiny, pear-shaped bugs found in groups. They can be green, yellow, pink, or black. They tend to feed on new growth. Mealybugs are pink, soft-covered insects covered with a white, waxy, cottony material. Whiteflies are small moth-like insects that are related to aphids and mealybugs. They will scatter when disturbed. They can cause silvering of the leaf tissue on the top side. Spider mites are tiny, 8-legged arachnids that produce webbing and cause stippling of the leaves. Thrips are tiny, black or yellow pests that feed on flowers or leaves. Symptoms look like scratches on the leaves or flowers. Several of these pests are listed in the reference guide with treatment suggestions as well. You can physically exclude pests by using physical barriers. You can place a floating cover early in the season to keep egg-laying pests such as cabbage moth from landing on your plant and using it as their breeding ground. You would cover beds by placing the floating cover over the whole bed and weighing it down with stones. Air, light, and water can still get in, but the insect will not. You can also protect individual plants by wrapping the cover around the plant. Many times I have gardeners ask me about gnats flying around their containers. These are likely fungus gnats and their larvae live in moist soil. This is typically an indicator that the container is staying too wet. A way to resolve this is to allow the container to dry out so that it is no longer an ideal environment for the larvae to live. Too much water can also cause disease issues. It can cause roots to rot, and if you water the leaves rather than the roots, it can cause fungal and bacterial diseases to develop. Make sure you have adequate drainage and are looking for signs of overwatering. In the planting video, I mentioned that companion planting was a good way to control pests. There are several plants that will deter pests. There's a table of these in your reference guide. For example, planting radishes with your cucumbers can help with cucumber beetle, while growing marigolds can deter many different pests. Using these natural deterrents are a great cultural control method. Trap cropping is slightly different. You plant a crop that is more attractive to a pest on the perimeter of your garden, and when the pest feeds on the plant, you kill them before they reach your crop. An example of this is planting large sunflowers outside of your garden. Stink bugs and leaf-footed bugs are attracted to the blooms. You spray the bugs at dusk with a quick knockdown pesticide like permethrin after the bees are back in their hive. The other option is to throw them into soapy water, which is what I do. Nasturtiums is a common trap crop for many pests, such as aphids, squash bugs, and cabbage worms. You can see in the photo that the nasturtium is covered in aphids. You can simply spray the aphids off or remove the nasturtium. One of the simplest control strategies is to remove the pests by hand. You can remove the pests early to prevent them from being a significant problem. Many are slow moving and can be washed or picked off. Spraying plants with water is a common strategy for aphids. I will also remove leaves that are heavily infested. Do not compost materials that have pests on them. You can also trap insects. There are pheromone traps for a variety of pests, including Japanese beetles and stink bugs. These traps are often brightly colored to attract the pest. Pheromones attract the pests so you don't want to keep these traps inside of the garden. There are also instructions on the internet for DIY traps you can make. You can trap snails and slugs by placing stale beer in a shallow dish to attract them. Make sure you dispose of the pests when you see them, because the beer only attracts them and not gets them drunk and kills them. You can also hang yellow sticky traps to catch flying insects such as whiteflies, beetles, and leaf miners. Hang them above your plants on a stake. If you have pests, but you see that something else is eating it, then let nature do its work. For example, you see that this tomato hornworm has white cocoons all over it. You may be tempted to kill this caterpillar if you see it, but you would also kill all these parasitoid wasp babies that are about to emerge from the cocoons. It is best to let them kill it for you and emerge to control more hornworms. One way to increase the number of natural enemies that you have is to plant a diversity of crops and include various pollinator crops. Many adults of natural enemies feed on pollen, so by having these plants around, you naturally attract them. Alternatively, you can purchase various biological control agents and release them. Ladybugs are readily available to purchase. They eat a variety of soft-bodied insects. It is best to water your plants and release them at dusk in order for more of them to stay. Lacewing larvae also eat soft-bodied insects. You often purchase these as eggs and sprinkle the eggs that are in the bran material. There are also beneficial nematodes that can be applied to the soil to control some caterpillars like cutworms. They are sprayed onto the soil. They have to be applied quickly after receiving them. Some pesticides, such as 7-Dust, are more toxic to people and the environment and can kill natural enemies. So we want to limit that use in the garden. There are several go-to pesticides that are more environmentally safe that I use in my garden. These first 3 are contact insecticides, so make sure you spray the leaves where the insects are in order for them to work. Insecticidal soap can be used on several common soft-bodied insects. It works by desiccating them. Horticultural oil suffocates pests and is effective for spider mites and scale insects. Neem oil, which comes from the neem tree, is effective on soft-bodied insects and some diseases. Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT, is a soil bacterium which has a protein that is toxic when ingested. This is effective for caterpillars. Spray this on the leaves that the caterpillar will eat. Diatomaceous earth can be effective for crawling pests like some ants, slugs, and earwigs. You can apply it to the soil where they will crawl or on the leaves. Pyrethrin, which is mentioned for trap crops, offers a quick knockdown of pests. It comes from an African chrysanthemum plant. Do not confuse this with pyrethroid, which is synthetic, has a long residual, and it is not environmentally friendly. With all pesticides, make sure you are following the label directions. There is a list of organic pesticides in the reference guide. Some of you may want to try making some DIY pesticide recipes. This is a recipe that I got when I was working with a community garden. You mix 2 tablespoons of Dr. Bronner peppermint liquid soap and add a teaspoon of dish soap like Dawn to 1 gallon of water and place it in a 1-gallon sprayer. Since this works on contact, spray this wherever you see pests. Note that this may also kill beneficial insects, so avoid spraying when you see beneficials. I have a few other DIY recipes in the reference guide. Diseases caused by fungi, bacteria, and viruses can occasionally cause problems in the garden. Fungi and bacteria spread through water, so limiting the amount of water on the leaves through your irrigation can greatly reduce your problems. By having a diversity of crops in your garden, you also reduce the dispersal of pathogens because diseases are often species specific, unlike many insect pests. That is why it is important to spread your crops over several gardens if you want to plant a lot of any one crop. For containers, you can have containers in different places. If you have a crop that becomes diseased, make note of which cultivar that crop was and identify the disease by the symptoms. The next year, you can start your own seeds and look for seeds that have resistance to that disease to keep it from recurring again in the garden. For example, notice that this packet of Cloudy Day hybrid tomatoes is resistant to early and late blight. So if you've had that problem previously, then this would be a good cultivar to grow. These are some common diseases of vegetables. Powdery mildew is caused by a fungus forming spots or patches of white to grayish talcum powder-like growth. This is common on cucumber and squash plants. You can use a homemade baking soda treatment or diluted milk to treat this disease. Downy mildew causes yellow spots between the veins of a leaf with fuzz on the underside of the leaf. These also infect cucurbit plants as well as cruciferous plants, basil, sunflowers, and spinach. Late blight is a devastating disease of tomatoes and potatoes, causing the leaves, stems, and fruit to get blotches that spread. Bacterial leaf spot causes small water-soaked leaf spots on the older leaves of the plant. It affects cabbage, lettuce, pepper, and celery. Fungal leaf spots are brown, yellow, or black spots that affect the leaves or fruit of a variety of vegetables. Keep in mind that there are many more diseases that I haven't mentioned. When you see a plant with shriveled or spotted leaves, rotten fruit, or other signs of disease, you can pick away the diseased portions immediately and discard them. If you use garden shears to prune diseased leaves, then disinfect your shears by spraying them with a 10% alcohol or bleach solution, or wiping them with isopropyl alcohol. This is because diseases can easily be spread from plant to plant. Do not add this material to your compost pile. If the plant's problem is severe, remove the entire plant, including the roots, and discard it. Here are some of the fungicides that I keep on hand. Keep in mind that many fungicides do not kill the pathogen, but stop it from spreading. You often have to reapply it every couple of weeks. Copper fungicide and chlorothalonil work on a wide range of diseases. Sulfur is more effective on rust, leaf spot, powdery mildew, and some insects. Neem oil is mainly for insect control, but will work on powdery mildew as well. Follow the label directions for all of these products. These are also listed in your reference guide, so you can refer back to it. Pests and diseases are often what causes a gardener to pull their hair out because it is not black and white when it comes to managing pests. You may spray a pesticide, but it may not manage the pests completely. So you want to take an integrated approach to controlling pests and not rely on a single method. There are many more strategies than what I cover in this video, but hopefully this gives you a good starting point. Make sure you inspect your plant often so that you can manage them quickly. Identify your pests and diseases first so you can manage them strategically. You may want to purchase a couple of general organic pesticides to have on hand for when pests come. Hopefully you got some useful tips on how to manage pests and diseases on your vegetables.